Hi guys, and welcome to another video of the Energy System Analysis Python course. My name is Anas Abuzayed, and today we will talk about some of the built-in functions or built-in commands in Python. So we learned previously how to define a list. So let's just define a list of numerical numbers. I would say A is the list, and then I'll just put random numbers. So a list of 7 numbers. So we have different built-in functions. For example, if I want to know the length of this list, how many items are in there. So len of A gives me basically the length of this one. If we print out the list A, we have 155, 70, 80, minus 10, 2.4, 2.4, sorry, and 6. So if I want to sort out this list, let's say just A.sort, this basically gives me a sorted list from minimum to maximum. Let's say we want to know the summation, or we already know the length. So let's do the summation of it. So sum of A gives you the summation out of it. So in order, for example, to calculate the mean, the average, there is no built-in function that does that. Later on, we will know that there is libraries in which you can calculate the mean. So in this case, we don't have any built-in function for that. So it's basically the summation of A over the length of A will give you the average for this list of numbers. So let's say we add in a bit of more numbers. So let's say A dot append 55, and let's say A dot append 470. So now we have 9 numbers again. So if we go back to calculate the average, it's 81.04. So we have another built-in function, which is the round function. So to round it to the nearest number. So if we say this number here and round, it will give us 81. So it basically dumped out all of the decimal numbers in there. So let's say we want the first 2 digits to be seen, or to be, let's say, printed out or calculated. Then I add in a number here, 2 or 3, let's say 2 in this case, 1, 81.0, or 3, and so on. So let's see our list again. A, we have our first entry is basically a negative value. So if I say A of 0, this will give me the minus 10, the first entry or the first element of this list. So if I want the absolute value, so the positive value of it, I just say ABS, this would give me this value. So be reminded again that this is not an entry, it's only a command. So if you go back to the list again, you still see the minus 10. So if I want to replace this element here, the first one to be 10, not negative 10, in this case, I need to assign it. So the first element, A of 0, is basically an absolute value of it. So now if we print out A again, we see that this minus 10 changed to 10. Other stuff is like the minimum of A and the maximum of A. So this gives you the minimum and the maximum of a list. Let's try something out. Let's say A dot append, and then we add a number, but as a string. So let's say we add 5. So now in our list, we have the same old list that we had, and then the new entry, the string. If I try out again the minimum and the maximum, so let's say the minimum or the maximum, this would give me an error because it cannot basically compare an integer or even a float to a string value. If we say A.sort and we sort it, it's the same. So in order to use these commands, let's say the sort, the maximum, the minimum, the summation, we need a list of numbers because that's where our mathematical operations are applied to. Of course, I can say len of A, this would not give me an error. So it's 10 elements, regardless of which type those elements are. Let's go to another type of built-in functions, which is range. So range basically gives you, here you can see it, stop, So if I say range of 9, this would give me a range of numbers from 0 to 9. But here you don't see the numbers. So you only see that it's a range. If I want these numbers, let's say from 0 to 9, so 0, 1, 2, 3 till 9, then I have to use another function called list. So list of range of 9 would give you those numbers. Here in range, you will not see the last number. So this one here, there are 9 elements. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So 9 numbers, but you will not see the end here, which is 9. So if you want to iterate, let's say, or have a range of numbers actually from 0 to 9, then you need to say range of 10. So if we try it out, list of range of 10, this will give you the actual numbers. So we already know how to calculate the length of it. So len of list of range, again, it's 10 numbers here. So in range, you can, or let's say you can define what is your starting point. So if you don't define it, if you say only any number, let's say 100 or whatever you want, it will always start from 0. But if you say range 2 to 4, and then let's say we have a list for it, this would actually give you the numbers 2 and 3, so without 4. So you can define where to start. Let's say we have a list of numbers from 2 to 40. So this would give you the last element would be 39 in this case. So it's basically starting from 2 and ending with 39. Let's see if we have a step. So basically, give me numbers from 2 to 40 or 2 to 100 with a step of 5 or with a step of 4 or with a step of 2, let's say. So if we try it now, you can see that it basically have this jump or this step where you can move in from 2 starting point to 40, the ending point, with a range of 2. Let's say that we want 40 to be in this list. In this case, if I do 41 or even 42, it will be the same output. Why? Because the endpoint of the function range will not be included in the range, in the actual range. So going back to our list A, we know that we have 10 elements in it. So if, let's say you don't use Spider, you don't have the variable explorer, so len of A, you can see it. Let's say we want to define a range based on this length. So range, let's say from 0 to 10. We know that we don't need to include 0. It's a default in Python. So range of 10. But we want this range always to be depending on the actual length of our list. So in this case, we use range of length. So basically we use a combination of both. So range of len of A or length of A is basically a range from 0 to 10. Again, if we want it as an actual list to see the actual numbers, not the range, we add a list. So list basically converts this range from this number to this number to an actual list of this range. So you have the actual numbers in there. So something like this. Another, let's say, function or built-in function that I commonly use is format. So let's say that we have a string. So let's say b equals solar is, and then built in. So I want to always change what is being printed. So if I say b, it will give me solar is built in and then a curly bracket. But I want to always change what is printed here. So I use format. So format here gives me what exactly you want to be, let's say, to be printed or to be added to this string. So in this case, let's say I want to say built-in south. Let's say in the, and then let's print out B again. So here, basically it changes based on whatever you use or whatever you enter in format. Let's say we say in the north and then B. So of course there's another way to do it. So let's say solar is built in the, and then again the curly format or the curly sorry bracket. Then we use F here, and then we say south. Here, basically it says that south is not defined. So we need to identify a variable here. Let's say we put X. So again, we do it. X is not defined. So X would be your actual variable when you, or your actual entry that you want to put inside the string B. So if you say south, so X is south, and then B here. So basically you put in the actual variable, not the value of it. So if you say X is south, of course, but if you say south, we saw it previously, it will tell you that it's not defined. So you need the actual variable. That's why we put F here to read it, and then the actual value to be replaced instead of those curly brackets. Let's say that we have a user. So there's other built-in functions. One of them is basically input. So input is a command that gives you as a user, let's say you have a GUI, and you put in, let's say you want the customer, or let's say the user of this script to input his own location or coordinates or whatever you want. So the values would be assigned from the user itself, not the let's say the developer or the one who wrote the code. So let's say C equals input, and then you run this one. Here you will see that it's still running, and you can interrupt it, so it's still not, let's say, not executed. So if you say C equals input, and then you put 5, then C would be a string of 5, even though you enter the number. So how can I do it? Now, let's say C is a string. How can you convert a string to an integer, to a float, or to a float? You say float of C. So again, how can you do it here? You say float of input, and then you run it. So if we again enter 5, then C would be immediately identified as a float. Same thing, let's say if you want, let's go back to this one here. So C is a float. Let's put it without the float. So it's by default is a string. And then we say, okay, import this one, and then we say south. So now C equals south as a string. And then here we change it to C. The variable B will equal whatever you enter here because we change it to C. Another built-in function is print. I think it's straightforward, so you can have it, let's say the same one that we did here. Usually, let's say this string B, we just put it here and it will give us the value of it. But in case you run the whole script together, even if you say B, let's say you put B here, it will not be shown normally. So you need to print it somehow to get the value of it. So Solar is built, in this case, C is an input and a string, sorry, of 1000. So the term here makes no sense. Or you can do the same with format. So this one here, then you say print and this format. So one built-in function that we want to learn about in this course. Let's say we have B equals, so, okay. Let's say B equals Solar is built in the node. So there's a built-in function, the split function, that basically splits the string itself. So it cannot be executed on numbers. There's other ways if you want to split numbers, let's say, but not with the split. But you want to split the, let's say, to have each word on its own. So if you do it like this, it will return a list where each word, because they are with a space, each word will be returned as an element of this list. So let's say Solaris, say, so there's no space, and you do B dot split, so it will not identify it. So it needs to be split, let's say in this case with a space. So the default is a space. Let's say that we do it with an underscore. And then we execute b dot split again. So it will return a list. B dot split will always return a list where each element is the split, the result of the split. In this case, we said the default is a space. So there is no space in here, so it took it as one element. But we define it, or we can define it as split it based on what? So in this case, based on an underscore. So it will give us the output of it. If you say you want, let's say you want always to have the first element of it, which is in this case the carrier. So b dot split will return the list, and we know that in order to access the first element, it's you put the number 0 inside the brackets. So let's say you want only, so here we see, for example, that b dot split with the underscore gives you back or returns back all of the elements in the result of the split. Let's say you only want the first one to be splitted and then the rest to be as in the original. So let's say we want to have a list where the first element is solar and then the second element is a string with all of those, so without splitting them. So in order to do this, we can add in the which one we want or which element we want. So in this case, we want one element, or let's say the first word to be splitted and then the other or the rest to be together. We can do it even, we want solar as, so something like this, and then you will have it. So one thing that I wanted to also mention, let's say we have a string, C equals solar, and we want each character of this solar. So if you say C dot split, it will give you, or it will return back a list of the result of the split. But we want each character to be on its own. So the way to do this in Python is by saying list of this character, or let's say list of solar. This will give you, or will return back a list of all of the characters that are there. In this case, if we say list of solar or list of C, it's the same result. So those are the built-in functions that I normally use, or let's say most commonly use. Of course, they are not the only ones. If you open Google and just say, or type down built-in functions or even internal functions in Python, you will find tons of them. You might find them useful. You might never use them in your life. So it depends the type of application that you want to use Python with.